Hello everyone, my name's Stephen Redman and welcome to Pastor's Library. This is the channel where we discuss all sorts of theology books, and today I want to talk about a Bible translation, a particular layout of a Bible translation, which I think is definitively British. So here we go with the Everyday Faith Bible. The Everyday Faith Bible. This Bible uses an anglicised text, which I thought meant that in the American Bibles it said Pilate judged Jesus on the sidewalk, and in ours it said on the pavement, but it apparently doesn't mean that. So there are subtle differences, and of course the word favour has got a U in it in the anglicised text. But anyway, this Bible is published by the Bible Society, which is a long-standing, very eminent group of people who are committed to making the Bible available as far as it possibly can be. And this is their, shall we say, their latest attempt at having a standard Bible for them. And it's hardback. It's only available in hardback at the moment. It was published in 2026, which means it's just come out this year, for me anyway. And it's a joint project with LIC, which is the London Institute for Contemporary Christianity. And these two agencies together have made this available, and it's in the new NRSVU version. So, this very British Bible we're going to talk about for a few minutes. Just to say, when it comes to the NRSV, that was a Bible that I started using when I was doing my master's degree because it was required. Now, I did my master's degree in a Pentecostal Bible college, and the NRSV was at that time the standard version for academic use in the UK. And so I think still to this day it is largely the recommended or required use version for quotes in bachelor's and master's essays. Doesn't mean you can't use other translations, but the NRSV is the commonplace one that should be used in academic circles. The NRSVUE, I haven't heard anybody say yet that is taking over from the NRSV, but it may do. Some people watching this channel today may have clearer information on that than I do. If so, please leave a message for me today. But this particular presentation of the NRSVUE has got broad margins. Now, in the broad margins, there may well be some text. I just opened this at random in Psalm 57, 58, 59. And on the left-hand side, the margin had a section on Psalm 57, verses 1 to 2. And there is a story in there about someone called Rebecca. And a modern anecdote by one of the groups that have authored this latest version. And you will often find in this translation that there are these particular anecdotes mentioning real people, maybe with their names changed, and using them as an example to point out what the scripture is saying. And we'll deal with some of those pretty soon. But there is a lot of space also for you to write notes. There's an example for you. Lots of space. It doesn't mean that every page has got lots of space, but it does mean that most pages have got lots of space. So here's the sort of thing you'll find in this Bible. This is a genre introduction, and it's entitled How to Read Biblical Law. And it goes into, right at the beginning of the Bible, the genre that you are now engaging with, and tells you how to read it and how you might consider it. And it gives realistic ways of understanding what the word says if it perhaps isn't 100% clear and it needs further direction. Now, I think that they're normally double pages. I think those actually are really helpful in this Bible. I think they offer something that is really helpful when you're trying to get hold of what this Bible is. I'm very well aware that at this moment in time, there are lots of people in the UK who are picking up a Bible for the first time. We've seen this by the massive increase in sales of Bibles in the UK, and by the fact that many of us pastors are seeing people come into church for the first time, but they're carrying a Bible and they've been reading the Bible and yet they've never been to church before. And all I would say is I think that a Bible like this that explains basic things like you are now entering the Pentateuch, this is the genre of law, and it goes into details that set the scene for the reader. And I think that that's a very helpful point of view. So I said about these messages in the wider margins. Against Exodus 26, it says this: as a textile artist, I'm struck by how constantly and time-consuming the creation of the tabernacle would have been. Now, when you start to read the building of the tabernacle, you could easily just think, they did this one afternoon. This was a major exercise. And what this person who's written it, who is called Gail and is a textile artist from West Sussex, she is saying, because of her experience, it's really overwhelmed her just what a major project building the tabernacle was. And she says, even today, with computer design software and electric sewing machines available, creating large-scale works is a major undertaking. How much more costly, materially and personally for people camping in the desert. And I just thought, well, this type of message printed on the page just allows us a moment to sit back and consider the broader context of what was happening there and then, and realizing that this isn't just a list of materials. There is a lot more to what the Bible is saying there. And I found that was actually very helpful indeed. Going over to Deuteronomy, in chapter 18, there's a section where it says, child sacrifice, divination and magic prohibited. And it says against that, what's your sign? Now, to those of you that have been Christians for quite a long while, someone saying what's your sign might make the hair on the back of your neck stand on end. But to people who are just picking up the Bible, this is something that they may have had lots of people say to them in their lives. And what it goes on to say is that star signs, tarot, mediums, spells, our society is increasingly open and receptive to all kinds of spiritualities. This passage reminds us that God is not, and neither should we be. And there's another sort of paragraph on that. But these are not wishy-washy comments in the margins. They're very relevant and definite. But for people that are just picking up a Bible for the first time, this actually, might be a godsend. There's another one of these double-page inserts, feature, they're actually called, a feature, that really stuck out at me. It's called Reading Uncomfortable Passages. It talks about the good, the bad and the ugly of everyday life. And it says that the Bible not only shows us God's holy, just and loving character, but also the highs and lows of our relationship with him. It talks about slavery, for example. It talks about discomfort. These are all very valid points. And whereas when I picked up a Bible for the first time, when I was 8 years old, none of those questions were in my mind. These days they would be. And I think it's very valid that LICC and the Bible Society have put such comments in the margins. Now, if you wanted any more, if you had any more doubt that this is a Bible of our times and it's written for today, then on against 2 Kings chapter 12, there is this comment: "My young Padawan." If you don't understand that, there's nothing I can do to help you. But it says that, it then goes on about Jehoiada and Jehosheba brought up a godly leader, Jehoash, and it goes on to talk about, is there a young person or several in your life that you can pray for, train and mentor, and even protect when they need it? And that just tells you that maybe you may have a Padawan available to you. It's a Star Wars thing, okay. Another interesting double pager was the timeline of kings of Israel and Judah. Now, I remember at age 10 really struggling with the idea of this. And if I'd have had a Bible that had this in it then, I think this would have been fabulous for me. And it clearly lays out the names, the dates. We've got a clear timeline running across the top and some major historical effects. And I say it's a double pager. Actually, this is a quadruple pager. There's another section that's interesting in genres, and it talks about how to read biblical wisdom. Again, I think that unless someone tells you these things, how will you know that you have moved genres, other than you might feel there's something different about this? Against Psalm 72, there's a comment that says, "Last night at the proms." Again, that's a very British concept. And in Psalm 72, it refers to, this is a song for a king, but these days it's MPs, councils and courts that govern the UK. Take some time to pray for your local MP and political leaders, that they would lead with wisdom, bring prosperity to the people, defend the afflicted and judge with righteousness. What a great insight. If you're British. Again, against Psalm 125, there is, which is one of the Song of Ascents, it says sing-along songs. And it goes into some depth, explaining that the Song of Ascents that these people would sing on their way up to Jerusalem, these were real sing-along songs that the people learned, and they would sing them as they marched along. And I think it just helps give a little bit of insight into how the journey might have been. There's 3 paragraphs covering that, and all of them are worthwhile reading. So I suppose what I'm saying is that you get an awful lot in these margins, which none of it is particularly commentary style. But a lot of it will really help you think about the context. Again, particularly if this is your first Bible. There's another double pager of genre introduction for how to read biblical prophecy. Another insert in one of the margins for Isaiah 36 is entitled "Shots Fired." That's a very contemporary saying. We know what we mean when we say shots fired. But it's talking about people challenging your faith, even to the point of telling you to doubt or renounce God. It says they may mock you or spread false information. Has that ever happened to you? How did you react? If not, how do you think you would react? These are very valid questions, and I am sure that they offer any reader an excellent an introduction to the context of their first Bible. So, with all of these things, why the NRSVU? It is by no means the most popular version in the UK, although, like I say to you, it is without doubt the academic version of the Bible, and it's also a Bible that crosses the Catholic divide, because you can buy this with or without an apocrypha if you're buying the version itself. This version doesn't come with the Apocrypha. But this is something which is widely accepted. But why is it widely accepted? Well, of course, the New Revised Standard Version it started off with the Revised Standard Version, which itself was a revision of the King James Version. And the New Revised Standard Version, with its latest update, has been subtly changed. But in most cases, I think helpfully changed. I just want to talk about a couple of verses which I'm not so sure have been helpfully changed. So, just to say to you, I have plenty of NRSVU translations. This is my main NRSVU, which is a really good quality Bible. This one actually does have the Apocrypha in it, and it's got good, bold text, and I'm really quite fond of this. And I have read through that one, and I think it's a very helpful Bible. What I would say is that whereas the NRSV is a good academic Bible, I have never found it to be a good reading aloud Bible. It's never been a translation where I would bring it to church and read a whole chapter out to people, because I don't think the NRSV lends itself too much to public reading. And the one thing that I would say I think is noticeably better with the NRSVUE is that it is far better for public reading. Now, I've tried to look at chapters and say, what have they done? Well, I can't really quantify it, but I don't think there can be any doubt that they have approached this about making this a more publicly read version. And I think they've done a fairly good job of that, if I'm honest with you. In terms of the change in wording of the translation as it's been updated, there was one thing that really stuck out at me. And that is the famous word that was coined by the Apostle Paul. It was a compound word produced from the words for man and for bed. And an awful lot of the Greek language was produced this way. They put two words together to make another word. And I'm quite sure that the Greeks of that time had no problem in understanding what was meant by these compound words, because that was the way they took their sort of 3,500 word vocabulary that we have in the New Testament, and they propagated it and allowed themselves to cope with other concepts and other settings. Now, Paul took these two words, and in 1 Corinthians 6 verse 9 and 1 Timothy 1 verse 10, we have a word which is often in modern translations of the Bible translated as homosexual. Now, please, I'm not trying to have a go at anybody by this. I'm just trying to use an interesting look at how translation has changed in a new version of the Bible, which is the NRSVUE. Now, if you look at the RSV or the NRSV, you will see usually this word translated as sodomites. And, that's just the thing. I'm not particularly fond of the word because I am not sure that it even is intensely meaningful to most people today. I think the word homosexual is better because it's a scientific word. We all know what it means because it's easily checked by a dictionary. Homosexual is one man sleeping with one man, or, of course, one woman with one woman. And whereas we all know the Bible's prohibition of this sort of behaviour, and the word that is associated with it, which is sin, it's not about us having a go at anybody or saying anything. What we want to do is we want the Bible to be interpreted correctly. We want a good translation of words rather than a poor translation of words. Now, most modern translations, and I'm talking now of translations which have normally got a big board of translators, probably at least 48, more like 100 with the NIV and the CSB and the NLT, that's another big board. And when you read these, you'll find predominantly in the latest translations, it will be the word of the blended word of man and bed will be translated as men who have sex with men. And in most senses, I think that is probably the best translation, because that really is clearly the sense of what Paul was saying. But in the NRSVU, you'll find footnotes at those two verses that I gave you in Corinthians and Timothy, which just say the meaning of the original is uncertain. And I would just say to you, I'm really disappointed in that, because I cannot see how it could be uncertain. Because the way the Greek language worked, you put two words together and it meant something. And for Paul, I'm quite sure that Paul, who allegedly is the person who coined the phrase, although all we're saying is, in literature, it seems that he was the earliest to use it. But it may have been something that was going around anyway. But when you see this word used this way, it clearly does mean something akin to homosexual. Now, you've got people who have a bit of an agenda. I mean, I have a bit of an agenda, which is that I want to see the original Hebrew and Greek manuscripts translated accurately into English. Now, there are other people that have other agendas, people who want to bend what that meant. And I think if you always go back to the original, it's very hard to bend what it meant. I'm quite happy to agree that there may be 16th century German translations that say something different. But the point is, the Greek original did not say something different. This isn't about men and boys. This is about men of any age with men of any age. And I think in the NRSVUE, whereas they have got rid of sodomites, which I don't think is a bad thing to get rid of, and I would have preferred what the CSB and the NIV use, which is men who have sex with men, but they've adopted, but in the NRSVUE, they seem to have adopted the phrase men who have illicit sex, men who engage in illicit sex. Now, what does that mean? It says at the bottom of the page, we're not absolutely sure what the original meant, but I think what we can fairly well say is it didn't mean men who had illicit sex. It meant men who bedded men. And if you're saying illicit sex, well, what you're doing is you are spreading the meaning a little bit so that it might mean other things. And I think that's sad. I understand the pressure in a society where anything goes, and we are supposed to understand that, gay friends are not doing anything wrong, and in British law they aren't. And I do know some gay people I work with in charity situations who are really, really nice people, and I wouldn't want to see them hurt. But this isn't about that. It's about what the Bible says. And, it's quite clear to me that Paul did mean that these are the people that won't get into the kingdom of heaven. And it lists men who have sex with other men. So the NRSVUE, in an effort to not mistranslate, has, I think, really mistranslated. And I would like to know why the NRSVU Translation Committee think that they are the only ones that are making an effort to not mistranslate. Because that's the entire point of a translation team. All checking each other's work, all reading through, having regular meetings and thinking carefully before they introduce a translation change into an update. And I just think that I feel a little bit let down by that. Like I say, it's not about the subject, it's about the lack of daring to say what we do actually know, that this is what Paul meant. And to say we don't actually know what Paul meant, I think is a little bit deceiving. And I think it's disappointing. Is there anything else that I can really criticise about the translation? Well, there are one or two translation points, like in any English version, that I personally would not prefer, but I wouldn't say that I found anything else quite as disappointing as that one word. So that's just my comment, and I'd be interested if any of you NRSVUE translators have listened to this, I'd be interested in any comments. But realistically, it's what I think. And of course, when I say this, there are an awful lot of people who think this way. I'm not a loner, so to speak. But is this a good translation? Well, I would suggest to you that this is an excellent translation. Like all the rest of them, it isn't perfect. The King James Version isn't perfect. The RSV isn't perfect. The NRSV isn't perfect. The NIV isn't perfect. The CSB isn't perfect. The NET isn't perfect. As much as I would like to find one of them that was, they are all very good translations. But with this particular one, I would say the layout of this, the pricing and the quality of the hardback, I think are very, very good for a new adult believer. And I certainly would recommend it. Now, in America, where you have favour spelt without the U, whereas all I can do is pray for you, you will find that there are other not too dissimilar derivations of the NRSVU, either out or on the way out to you. But what I am saying to you is this is a very fair translation. In most cases, I have given you a critical assessment of a couple of verses. But other than that, I still think this is a good thing. I'm quite glad that I am quite glad for the £22 that I parted with to buy this, because I think it's good value overall, and I'm sure I will use it more. So that's the Everyday Faith Bible, published by the Bible Society and the LICC, and I commend it to you. If you have any comments to make, please leave them below. And of course, if you haven't already done, leave us a thumbs up, subscribe and click on the bell, and that will help the channel get along. Thank you so much for listening today. God bless you, and until next time, bye!